Now, if you're following along with this series, but you have not watched the first video, I highly recommend you do as we go through the fundamental basics of the player. Now, the first thing we're going to want to do is go into our player script because we're going to add new variables and new content. So we'll want to add export variable attack number, and it'll be equal to 3. We'll also initialize this variable as an integer. Then we will instantiate a new function called funcReady. And we'll have our animation tree active when it is set. So we'll want to disable our animation tree here. Next, we'll want to go over and set our animation tree's attack patterns. Next, we'll go down and we'll create a new function, and this one will be called move. And it'll just be our move and slide function. This is in case we want to disable movement and we don't have to type in the entire function. Then what we'll also want to do after that is put our move function inside and then set in a variable called attack combo, and we'll put our input vector inside. Next, what we'll want to do is create our attack combo function. And include our input vector here. Now what we'll want to do is put if input.isAction just pressed attack, and our attack number is set equal to 3, then we'll want to set attacking to true. And we'll want to start something called an attack timer, which we will initialize soon. And an animation tree.get parameters playback. Then we'll want to also do .travel and then put our attack here. We can just get rid of this and leave our attack combo function here. We're going to copy and paste and just rename. We will actually not need our input vector, so you can just remove that. But what we will need to do is set another function, which will be called remove attack number. And this will just subtract our attack number. And we will run this in our animations. Next, we will be making our timer. So create a timer, set it to the very top, and then what we'll want to do is call it attack timer. Go up and set on our onReadies the attack timer. Then under the attack timer, we'll want to set to 0.7, but you can change it depending on your animation lengths, and we'll put it as 1 shot. After doing so, you want to go under node and click on timeout. You'll have a prompt here, and you'll just want to click connect. And then under this function here, we'll want to set our attack number equal to 3, and is attacking is equal to false. Reasoning being is this way, every time the timer goes down, we can no longer make a combo even if we've lost our time. So I imported the new assets and all the different attacks. So the player here has different attacks that can be used, and I'll just go over the basics of the changes. So we need to make sure that we add the remove attack number before we do finish attacking. And we do this from our previous video. We just right click and we click on insert key. Then we look for the function once we've saved the script. And we'll go into our animation tree. And this is the pattern that you should be following down here. So it'll go from idle or run to attack 1. And then through the animation player, it'll go to attack 2 and attack 3. Now that we've loaded into our game, we can press F once, then F again, and then we can do a third attack. You will have to do this in rapid succession in order for it to work, much like any other game. Before we move on to making the enemy, we're going to have to go over to any of our animations and make sure that our blend is going as a dotted line. I'm really not too sure what this means, but it allows for the animations to go more smoothly. Next, we're going to create our enemy. So we'll want to first create a character body 2D. And then under that, we'll want to add a collision shape, a sprite 2D, and an animation player, and an area 2D, and duplicate it. Give each of them collision shapes. We're going to then rename these areas to attack detector, and this will be our attack box. Save the scene. We'll create a new folder. It'll be called enemy, and then we'll rename this scene to enemy. We're going to next rename this to enemy, and then up here we'll go and create new inherited scene, or Control-Shift-N, and then we'll select the enemy and we'll create our first enemy. In this case, I'll be using some free sprites of a skeleton, and I have just imported our skeleton sprite. We will drag this up, then just do our frames. We'll save this and call it our skeleton enemy. Now we're going to next add our animation tree. Reasoning being is we cannot manipulate an animation tree if we have inherited it from a new scene. So we have to create a new one. Select our animation player here, save, and then we will start creating our script under enemy though. So right off the bat, we will initialize some export variables. This one will be our speed variable. This one will be our health, which we will have to add for our player before we begin testing our game. Our knockback strength, which is equal to 100. However, I do recommend that you change it to 80 if you do not want the knockback to be so powerful. And then lastly, we'll initialize an onReady var variable, and this will be our animation tree. We'll create some variables for vectors. We'll first create our knockback direction vector. Be sure to understand that this is the direction of the enemy's knockback, or in this case, this script's knockback. However, it's different than if we had normal knockback, which will be the knockback that's actually applied to our enemy. It'll make sense once we finish the rest of the code. For our ready function, we will do animation tree .active is equal to true, just like our player script, and we will change this to physics process. First thing we will do is check if the enemy has died. So if it is less than or equal to 0, then we will initialize our death function. Then if we see the player, then we will get the player node. The neat thing about these functions are we don't have to be in the same scene, but rather we just have to specify the name of the node. However, I will mention that if you have a scene that you're looking for within multiple scenes, you will have to continuously add .getParent. We'll then do accelerate towards point, which will be one of our functions that we create, and we will put in our player and we will put in delta. Then we will initialize move and slide. Else, we will have our animation tree play the idle. And here is a very important part. We will be adding our knockback. And our knockback direction, which is the direction to where our enemy hits our player, is equal to the move direction of the enemy. So whatever direction the enemy is walking towards, that will be the direction of the knockback that the player receives. And here I'm just initializing the vectors. Delta allows for a smoother transition when you are getting hit with knockback. Now we will create our accelerate function with point as one of our parameters and delta. This is for future videos when we have our enemies become more advanced, if say they were going to random positions or if they were scouting. But that will be for another video. We will set our move direction to our point's position and have it normalized. Then our velocity will be equal to our movement and our knockback multiplied by 2. If you were to have this multiplied by 1, it would not have an effect, and it would be the same as having knockback of 1. There was a recent comment that was asking why I do use animation trees, and it is mostly because it allows me to do stuff like this, where I don't have to manually change everything if I add new animations. And it can apply to any kind of file. So for example, NPCs and enemies. It's much easier to implement it than if I was to add a separate state machine script. But in future videos, I may implement secondary animations with a state machine. We're going to want to add a signal from our attack detector, and it will be an area. Sorry, body. So body entered. And then we will have body exited. And these will detect for the player. Lastly, we're going to add our death function. We can add animations later, but for today we'll just have a QQ free. And there's a little error right there. There we go. Now we have our enemy script. We can go on to the player script. Before we do anything with the player script, we're gonna actually want to add an area. We'll rename this to attack detector. And then we'll add a collision shape. And then as for the size, we'll create a capsule, but depending on your sprite, you may want to change it. We will then connect our player area detector to the area, and then we'll just begin overhauling the code here. First, we will add some new export variables. This will be our health. It'll be an integer value, and it'll be 4, but you can't change it. Export variable attack power. Integer is equal to 1. Then we will add in our knockback strength, which can be equal to 100, but you can also set it to 80. Then we will add our own knockback vectors. So knockback direction will be equal to vector2.0. However, our normal knockback will be equal to vector2, 0, 0. We'll then go down here and write if our health is less than or equal to 0, then we will call in our own death function. Next, we're going to go in and initialize our knockback. Knockback will be equal to our knockback dot move toward vector2.0, and it'll be times 200 or 200 times delta. And we will actually move our input vector out of our attack, mainly so that way for multiple attacks we also have our input vector and it doesn't go into different directions that it's not supposed to. Here we will add knockback to our velocity. Currently it's 0, but if we do get knockback received, it will apply it to our velocity. This is because we can't really do much with our move and slide function, as it does not accept any parameters anymore, unlike Godot 3. Next, we will actually go into our sword hitbox and make sure that we have area entered for our sword hitbox. Before we add anything into here, we will just initialize our death function and do QQ free as well. So for our attack detector, what we'll want to do is check if area is in group enemy. We will add it our group later, but we'll do health is minus equals to area.getParent, which is the parent function of the area that we got attacked by its attack power. Then we will go to knockback, and it'll be equal to the knockback dot move forward, and it'll be vector 2.0 and 100. Oh, there we go. Next, we will have our knockback be equal to the area's knockback direction times its knockback strength. Down here, this will be how the enemy is affected. So if area.isInGroup enemy, then the area.getParent.knockback will be equal to the knockback direction, our knockback direction, times knockback strength. Then area.getParent's health will be minus equal to attack power. So very briefly before I add animations, I will go under the enemy and show you that the enemy attack detector will be the biggest circle. This is what checks for the player. And this will be where the player actually gets hit. So you can change that, and in the future videos, we will be adding the attacks from the enemies. Just before I test the game, make sure that your animation tree is deactivated. But I have all the animations here. I need to turn it on. Then you can see that our sprite moves in all directions that are specified. One last thing I forgot to mention is the knockback direction should be equal to our input vector. Under our world, we will add in the skeleton, move him a little bit away, and then we'll test the game. So once we've actually loaded in, we can walk over to our enemy. We can hit him with the weapon that we've now allowed for combos. And I've disabled attacks for now just to demonstrate this, but now knockback is applicable. And if we let the enemy attack, he pushes us back with his knockback. I will say thank you guys very much for all the new subscribers lately. It has been really great for the channel, and I've been planning on releasing some sprites if we reach up to 100 subscribers. So be sure to reach that goal, and I'll be able to produce and release some free sprites for your game.